More posturing in America's relationships with world powers and worldwide threats.
You really have kind of a slow motion Cuban Missile Crisis. You have this plump, immature, irrational kid in charge of this country, which is a brutal dictatorship.
Florida Congressman DeSantis and Rutherford weighing in on national security issues. We're also talking about issues in Northeast Florida, including Navy expansion at Mayport. That's ahead on This Week in Jacksonville. Countywide elected office, now statewide influence, and now John Rutherford. He represents the region to the entire country. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday morning. The freshman congressman spent time in district on the first extended break from work in Washington, D.C. We spoke about an important consideration to his constituents. He says it's health care reform.
I think one of the things that's on everybody's mind, obviously, is health care and where that's going to go, and really how does that impact on tax reform down the road, and they are somewhat linked, and but I'm confident that we're going to get the health care straightened out here in the very near future. I told somebody, I said, 12 years as sheriff and 3 months as a congressman, I know this much. It's a lot easier being sheriff and running that agency than it is to be the Speaker of the House and trying to run all those Republicans.
Is there anything good that maybe happened for this edition of Congress and the new president's administration in not having that first health care push go through? Maybe understanding, okay, we should approach this a different way, gather consensus first?
I'll tell you, look, they did gather consensus first, even though the commitment was there, and then when it got down to the specifics, it started, somewhat people peeling off. But here's the thing, and kudos to the Freedom Caucus, who really there's more in this bill now that will truly drive down cost of health care than originally, mainly because they pushed the leadership to actually run some things by the parliamentarian over in the Senate to make sure that the Byrd rule and the supermajority would not kick in with the Reconciliation Act, that it could pass as a Reconciliation Act. And that was done. And there were more things in there that really I think most anybody thought was possible. So that's a good thing. But Ken, I think what's important for people to understand that this health care bill is not a light switch. This health care bill is a three-legged race, if you will.
But that's what people want, right? They want the light switch. It's tough
they want the light switch, but you can't do that. And quite frankly, and this is where I get sideways with some of my colleagues who go out on television and say, look, let's just do a repeal and replace bill, you can't do that and they know that. And I think they were being disingenuous with the public saying that can happen when they knew they'd never get the 60 votes in the Senate. And that's why it has to be this three-phase process. And so, I tell people what you have to remember too when they look at the CBO score on this bill, look, you're talking about the four corners of that document. You're not talking about phase 2 and phase 3, which come in the future. And so, and that's really where a lot of the cost savings drive down. Now, some of that was pulled forward, and as I mentioned earlier, the Freedom Caucus was able to get some of that pulled forward into that first phase. And so the bill's better than it would have been. Yeah. And that's the process, that's the sausage making, if you will, in progress.
And I think as we were just discussing, it's tough for some people to be patient about that, but obviously you want to get it right, especially with the criticisms that are there for the Affordable Care Act already. Let me ask about national security and maybe start with border security. You said you even took a trip recently to our southern border.
Yeah, actually I was very honored. We had Codell Rutherford, the congressional delegation that 5 of my colleagues joined me. We went to the southern border. We started in San Diego and we worked our way all across the southern border to the Rio Grande Valley, and looking at the different structures that are in place and how we can grab operational command of some of the areas that are not in control right now. And we've had several years of not investing in our southern border security. Now, I think with you hear President Trump talking about the big beautiful wall, and he is committed to securing that border. And Congress is as well.
Wall there?
And there are some places where it will be a physical wall. In fact, they have physical walls up right now over a lot of it. Now, they are looking at different types of physical walls because all of these things are impediments, but they're not barriers. And so you can get over or under just about any kind of wall fence you put up. And so the important thing is having the resources to detect the breach and respond before those individuals can commit the breach and get into the country and disappear. Yeah. And so we looked at a lot of different options to secure that border. And I think a lot of it is going to be technology, giving us the capability to respond when the breach starts to occur and get you quickly there with resources. And I have to tell you, the Border Patrol folks are doing a fantastic job, I think, with the resources that they have. But some of the resources are just outdated. I mean, we've got World War II aerostat balloons with cameras on them that are flying, and they're only up about...
Time to upgrade.
Well, those are only up about 40% of the time because even in a high wind, they can't fly those. And so the bad guys see those come down, and then they march right on through. Yeah. And so that's an area where some walls and things, other technology may help.
I do need to ask you about the international scene and national security, big topic of conversation recently because of what happened in Syria, our response in Syria, and now these threats that are happening with North Korea. What's the solution there? What do you see happening in the near term on behalf of the United States?
Yeah, look, I think the president's response was absolutely correct in Syria. It was very limited in its scope, very specific in its direction. We went to great pains to make sure that we didn't heighten tension between the U.S. and Russia by giving them forewarning of what was about to happen. I think those were good moves. I think Assad now knows the United States is not going to tolerate the use of chemical weapons on their own people. We cannot allow that.
Mr. Rutherford also discussed the efforts he's making to get the Jacksport dredging project underway. That's available online for you. You go to news4jax.com, then to the politics page, and you'll find a tab for This Week in Jacksonville. There you can find all of our videos from recent broadcasts. Mr. Rutherford's colleague in Congress and another voice for Northeast Florida. Next on This Week in Jacksonville, my discussion with Ron DeSantis. Stay with us.
You can drive a truck, or you can team up with one. The 2017 Nissan Titan. Go the extra mile in a truck that has better acceleration, handling, and braking than Ford F-150. Take on any job. The newly redesigned family of Titans, featuring America's best truck warranty. 5 years, 100,000 miles, bumper to bumper. Get to your local Nissan store today and save $10,000 on the 2017 Titan XD.
Firehouse Subs was founded by 2 firefighters over 20 years ago. And once a firefighter, always a firefighter. So they've seen to it that a portion of your purchase at all U.S. Firehouse Subs locations now goes toward providing life-saving equipment for first responders. And one more thing, they make awesome subs. Now get any of our 10 specialty subs in a new small size, each under 500 calories. Big flavor, small subs, starting at $3.99. Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen.
Most of us play by the rules, but as taxpayers, we all pay the price for those who cheat the government. Only when someone comes forward to report these cheaters do we, the people, get justice. Last year, people with information about government fraud helped recover almost $5 billion. These whistleblowers were rewarded by receiving a percentage of the monies recovered. For more information about fraud against the government, call us or visit forthepeople.com. Morgan & Morgan, for the people.
Former Congresswoman Corrine Brown on trial for her life, facing over 300 years in prison.
It's bull.
News 4 Jax, gavel to gavel, inside and outside court. Updates minute by minute as the drama unfolds. Our team of 3 legal experts, unique perspective. The I-Team uncovering new information.
No one can tell my story better than I can.
Corrine faces the judge. Full coverage starting Monday on News 4 Jax.
I will see you in court.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Representative Ron DeSantis has been in the district the past 2 weeks. Chairman of the National Security Oversight Subcommittee, the Ponte Vedra Congressman, is serving his 3rd term in the House. In a conversation here at our station this week, DeSantis told me the past 4 years mean he has as much or more experience than the other members of Congress from our area.
Well, you learn a little bit how the trains work. Now, I'm also someone as a reformer. I want to change some of that stuff too. So you kind of got to walk a fine line there to a certain extent. But I think you do build relationships with people. And I think if you show proficiency in certain issues, then folks will listen to you. So, for example, with national security, it's been something I've been involved with a lot. Well, we're trying to bring an aircraft carrier down to Florida at Mayport. So, you know, I have a little bit more credibility making that case as somebody who's now been there a few terms, has kind of shown that I understand America's role in the world, and then I have a Navy background, I'm in the reserves. And so there are ways where, you know, you're just having built the relationships, you can do more. And obviously working with the administration helps too, because I think they're receptive of expanding the Navy, getting to 350 ships, and I think a component of that makes sense that you would disperse our East Coast carriers and have one in Florida.
Hey, so on the national security side, how do you feel about what's going on with North Korea and obviously some terrible attacks there in Syria that America has responded to?
Well, North Korea, you really have kind of a slow motion Cuban Missile Crisis. You have this plump, immature, irrational kid in charge of this country, which is a brutal dictatorship. It's imprisoned 24 million people for decades now. And I think the chance that Kim miscalculates is probably higher with regards to his regime than probably any of the other rogue states that are out there. And so they're a nuclear power. They may not have the ability to reach the continental United States now, but they're trying and they're close, and they represent a huge threat to the neighborhood, particularly South Korea, because Seoul is about 30 miles south of the DMZ. So this, I said a couple months ago, North Korea was going to be a crisis on this president's watch. It looks like we're pretty much there now. And the good news is it seems that China's been receptive to trying to stand North Korea down. And I think if China is willing to exert their pressure on North Korea, we can probably deal with it in a way short of having some really high stakes brinksmanship, which North Korea couldn't deal with Western military might, but they could do a lot of damage kind of as Kim's regime's going out the door. And obviously we want to avoid that if we can.
Yeah. How do you feel about the different stance, I guess, that the White House takes now with this president versus President Obama? I mean, the way that the president, Trump, speaks to these other nations is a lot different than President Obama did, right?
Well, certainly he's got his own style when he does the Twitter and whatnot, but I think it is important to look at the actual actions that are taken. And I think what he's done is shown himself to be very decisive. I mean, if you look at what happened in Syria, there was a chemical attack on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, it was being reported. We're kind of getting the facts. And then on Thursday, his military advisors provided him with a course of action, and he acted immediately. And I think the same thing with what you're seeing in Afghanistan, where he says, look, if we're in this fight, we got to be in it to win. I'm going to empower my military commanders and let them use the tools that we've given them to the fullest extent possible. So I think those are important just for what they were, but I think they have a larger significance, both in terms of our adversaries, North Korea, Iran, even Russia and China, that say, wait, there's a new sheriff in town. But then also, I think when you use something like the Moab, our troops, to me, that boosts their morale, because we've been fighting in Afghanistan with very restrictive rules of engagement, and I think we've lost service members because of that. Now we're saying, look, we're going to go whole hog and we're going to fight to win.
I saw that you had asked FEMA for some reporting on how things had gone in the wake of Hurricane Matthew. Where do things stand there, and are you getting the answers that you really need to address how FEMA has responded?
Well, we didn't get the answers that we wanted at the hearing, so we're having them give us answers in writing. But the problem with some of these local communities have is they clean up all this debris in some of the neighborhoods, and then they apply to have the FEMA reimburse them, and it takes sometimes years for them to get reimbursed. And so you have a tab of $150,000, $200,000 for a local municipality or community. That's a huge deal. Yeah, absolutely. So what we want to do is cut through the red tape. Let's speed this up so that the money can be sent back to the local communities for reimbursement. And if they're not entitled to that, then be clear about that up front so they know what they can do and what they can't do. There's a lot of confusion with a lot of these FEMA rules, and we want to try to avoid that so that we can streamline this and get it right. The other thing I would say is, you know, as we're coming up to the end of Trump's 100 days, one of the things that I think helped him get elected was his message to drain the swamp in Washington. And that involved, one of the things that involved was term limits for members of Congress. I'm actually leading that fight in the House. The other thing it involved was a lot of ethics reforms, a 5-year ban on members of Congress lobbying, a lifetime ban lobbying for foreign governments, same thing with congressional staff. And I think that that would have been an easy legislative win in his first 100 days. We drafted the bill just to track his speech so that we could put that out, because I think it'd be popular with Republicans, independents, and Democrats. And so I think it was a mistake not to have that be one of the first initiatives early on. So what I'm trying to do now is get with the White House and say, hey, let's push this soon, because these are the types, I think, of victories that aren't partisan in nature, but really show that you're a reformer trying to change Washington instead of somebody who's been captivated by Washington.
And we have more of our interview with Congressman DeSantis available to you online. Again, go to news4jax.com in the Politics tab. You're going to find also our interviews with Congressman Al Lawson and Ted Yoho from a week earlier. All right, we will fill up the table in a moment, talking about a program to empower small business leaders, the Venture Leadership event and the program there. We're going to talk about it next on This Week in Jacksonville.
It's the Parade of Homes. Tour beautiful model homes across the First Coast. Don't miss your chance to win an outdoor kitchen valued at $5,000. Pick up a copy of the Parade Guidebook at Jacksonville area gate stations or visit jacksonville.com.
Come on, open up. It's good for you. Just eat it. It's good for you. It's good for you. Colonoscopy prep. We'll drink up. It's good for you.
A Borland-Groover Clinic colonoscopy isn't just good for you. It could save your life. With our advanced technology and personalized patient care, you can count on Borland-Groover for exceptional care inside and out.
Get back to being yourself. Back to smiling and laughing again. Back to eating foods you love. Back to living confidently. With same-day dentures backed by our satisfaction guarantee. And for new patients, a free consult and x-ray. For affordable dentures, extractions, and implants, call 1-800-DENTURE or go to affordabledentures.com. You deserve a healthy, beautiful, and confident smile.
How do you know when to trust your instincts? Will they lead you to this, or this? If so, trust them. If not, you need better instincts. You can't fake steak. Longhorn Steakhouse. Tonight's special bone-in bold flavors. Get our new pork porterhouse, our new grilled lamb chops, and our signature outlaw ribeye. For lunch, try our steakhouse burger or any steakhouse lunch combo. Only at Longhorn.
Your car's transmission has 800 pieces. That means there are 800 things that could go wrong. When something does go wrong, there's only one place to go. AMCO. AA, MCO.
The Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce has an entrepreneurial growth division, and that part of the Jacks Chamber focuses on mentoring and helping businesses achieve success at each stage of business development. So joining us this morning, the vice president of that division, Carlton Robinson. Also have 3 guests with us, Ellen Sullivan, Jeannie Frederick, and Iris Simmons. And so as we start here, Carlton, maybe just lead us off by explaining Venture Leadership. This is a newer program. What is it?
It's a program opportunity for us at the Jacks Chamber to be innovative. As leaders in the community, we also have to take every opportunity we can to promote the entrepreneurial spirit, not just at the small business and entrepreneur level, but also in medium-sized businesses as well as large-sized businesses. And this provided us a great opportunity to exercise that.
Ellen, I know you lead a nonprofit, so that's a little different than I would think of entrepreneur. Wait, there's leadership and growth. Tell me about some of the things that you got out of participating in this venture leadership program.
Sure. Well, I work for the Bear Find Foundation, which is a nonprofit that's based here in Jacksonville, Florida. And our mission is to find missing children. And that's using sports marketing. So by partnering with professional sports leagues like minor league baseball, we produce signs that feature area missing children and place them in concourses. So last year, we actually went nationwide, and our signs were seen by over 30 million people to view photos of missing children. So now we're focusing on how we build our sponsorship and donors. And I found that the program was perfect around customer development. And as we looked at the tools and as we looked at some of the conversation that took place about innovation and customer development, it was perfect timing for us. And I've been able to take those tools back and put them to use right away.
All right. So finding some tools, how it applies to your organization. Jeannie, I want to hear about this from you as well. And I know when you shared with me some of the venture leadership program that we were talking about, innovative thinking, customer development, you mentioned that off camera, you mentioned leading culture was kind of the takeaway for you. How did this impact you and what brought you to that place?
Well, I'm the president of Women Business Owners here in Northeast Florida, and sometimes that can be a little tricky. Making sure that the culture is right to be conducive to meeting all our goals, our team goals. And so it just taught me a lot about communication and being aware of your team and how it was a great leadership exercise for me.
Yeah, so that came up, I would imagine, because we've got a lot of people who are not in the same organization, but you're the same goals. I want my business or my organization to do better, to be better. Iris, tell me a little bit about you and what you got out of this program.
Well, I'm the owner and founder of the Genesi Group Incorporated, and the Venture Leadership Program was profoundly perfect for me. It allowed me to not only just look at where I was, but to make application as to where I wanted to go. And as a result of it, by the third course, I went full-time in my business. It was an opportunity to really just grab that entrepreneurial spirit and be pushed to action.
So you were not full-time in that prior to, so this gave you a little confidence to take that next step, right?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Right, so Carlton Ram, is that a win? Is that a big win when you're talking about someone like Iris being able to say, yeah, let me do this full on?
It's a really big win for us for a number of reasons. One, what we really want to focus on is you don't have to be the entrepreneur in order to exercise the entrepreneurial spirit. You could be in a position working for someone in a medium or large size business, or you could be someone who's seeking to own your own business. All of the principles that we teach and share can be applied, but in different size ventures, and that's how we came up with the title Venture Leadership.
Yeah. Jeannie and then Ellen, maybe wrap it up for us, but how did you get involved and what was that thing that you said, maybe this is for me? What was the hook for you?
Well, Carlton called me and asked me if I wanted to participate. And at any time, I can strengthen my skills. I mean, I'm not perfect. And so I really jumped on it because I've participated in Jack's Bridges and found that to be an extremely helpful program. And so I jumped on this one and I was not disappointed.
How did he describe this to you? Ellen, what did he say to you that said, oh, you should participate? He said, I'm going to have you from 6 in the morning until 5 in the evening. What was the pitch, I guess, when it came to participating?
One thing is that it was unique and different, and that I would find it refreshing, and that's exactly what it was. And fortunately, it wasn't very time-consuming. We used the time very wisely. It was just a short period of time, and the interaction among all of us as individuals was really fantastic.
So, will there be more programs like this, Carlton? This is the first of the Venture Leadership. Will there be another cohort of people going through this, that sort of thing?
We look forward to having future cohorts. The flexibility of the program, 6 sessions, roughly 3 hours apiece, and we can change the duration from anywhere from 6 weeks to as long as 3 months based on the availability of participants. So we're looking forward to having more of these. We really want them to be shaped by the participants. So we can do different types of groups. We can target industries. We can target a women's group if we like. We can make it open to all. We can target a corporate group if we like. So we're extremely excited about the experience that was produced from the participants we had, and we look forward to doing more.
Yeah. Well, I keep hearing that small businesses are the lifeblood of a city, and certainly I've heard from other folks at the Jacks Chamber that that's a big deal that we see growth and development. So thank you for sharing your stories. Thanks for the ideas. Well, This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. Rick Mullaney is with us about President Trump's first 100 days. That's coming up next week. Plus, Jared Rice and the dollars pouring into the area during the Players Tournament. I'm Ket Justice. Thanks for watching. On air on Channel 4 and online at news4jax.com.
More people in Northeast Florida and South Georgia get their news from News 4 Jax than anywhere else.